It was a calm, sunlit afternoon in the peaceful suburbs. The gentle hum of everyday life surrounded the quiet neighborhood, children playing on the sidewalks, neighbors exchanging pleasantries in their front yards. Your disabled daughter, looking for a moment of solitude, decided to take a walk in the nearby forest. The towering trees and soft breeze offered a welcome escape from the pressures of daily life. She had always found peace among the trees, where the world's noise seemed to vanish, replaced only by the rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. With each step, the forest enveloped her in its calm embrace. Her disability, while always a challenge, felt lighter here. The uneven ground didn't seem to matter as much, the smell of pine and earth grounding her in a way that only nature could. She took deep breaths, her heart slowing with each inhale, as she left the world behind her. But that peace would not last. From the dense trees ahead, she heard a sudden voice, a harsh, piercing tone that broke through the serenity like a knife. "Hey! You! Stop right there!" Your daughter froze, her heart skipping a beat. The voice came from behind, a figure emerging from the shadows, stomping toward her with an air of superiority. It was HOA Karen. Her usual smug expression was now twisted with an aggressive anger, her eyes narrowed into a glare. "What do you think you're doing here?" Karen barked, standing in front of her. "You have no business in this part of the woods." Confusion and fear gripped your daughter. She had never seen Karen act like this before, her voice dripping with entitlement. I'm just walking," your daughter stammered, trying to remain calm. But Karen wasn't listening. She stepped closer, her voice rising, "You can't just come here whenever you feel like it. The HOA has rules. You're violating them." Panic welled up in your daughter's chest. The forest, which had once been a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The towering trees no longer seemed protective, instead, they stood as silent witnesses to her growing terror. "Stay away," your daughter said, trying to back away, but Karen's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with surprising force. "Where do you think you're going, huh? Running away like a coward?" Karen spat. Her grip tightened, pulling your daughter toward her. The heat of her anger felt suffocating, oppressive. It was clear that Karen wasn't about to let her go. With every step, she closed the distance, her steps quick and purposeful. In that moment, your daughter's fear shifted into sheer panic. She pulled her arm free and took off running into the dense forest, her breath quickening, her legs straining to carry her through the uneven ground. But Karen was fast, and she was relentless. "You can't escape," Karen shouted, her voice echoing through the trees. "You don't get to break the rules without consequences." The isolation of the forest, once a source of calm, now felt suffocating. Every footstep of Karen's echoed behind her, each one closer than the last. The sound of her pursuer's angry breathing spurred your daughter on, fear giving her legs the strength to run faster. But the forest was unfamiliar, and the shadows seemed to close in around her as she dashed deeper into the trees, her heart racing in her chest. Each step she took into the forest was a step further from safety, and with every beat of her heart, the distance between her and freedom grew smaller. The chase had only just begun, and she had no idea where it would end. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Your daughter's breath was ragged, her body aching from the exertion of running, but there was no time to stop. No time to rest. Her legs burned with every step, the uneven ground twisting beneath her feet. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and with each desperate breath, the cool night air felt like daggers in her chest. The haunting sounds of the forest seemed to mock her, the wind whispering through the trees, the distant cry of an owl somewhere high above. But it wasn't the forest she feared, it was the sound of footsteps behind her, quickening with every passing second. The voice of HOA Karen echoed in the distance, still full of malice. "You can't hide forever. I'll find you." Your daughter's heart raced, her mind spinning as she stumbled over roots and rocks, her vision blurry in the dimming light. She could hear Karen's footsteps growing louder, her voice more frantic. The once tranquil woods had become a labyrinth of shadows, every tree a looming figure in the growing darkness. She couldn't see clearly anymore, the fading daylight leaving the forest in a near-impenetrable blackness. Panic surged through her as she realized she had no idea where she was, no sense of direction. The path she had followed was lost to her now. She was deep in the heart of the woods, with no clear way out. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to push through the exhaustion. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of fear dragging her down. Her legs ached, and a sharp pain shot through her side. She stumbled again, barely managing to catch herself against a tree, her fingers digging into the rough bark for support. She looked up, hoping to see some sign of help, but all she saw were towering trees and thick brush stretching into the void. The dark forest seemed endless, the deep silence surrounding her except for the echo of her own heartbeat and Karen's shrill voice cutting through the night. "Don't make me come after you!" Karen yelled, her voice laced with rage, closer now than ever before. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, as though the forest itself was closing in on her. The trees towered like giants, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers, clawing at the sky. The path was gone, and there was no sign of safety in sight, just the suffocating darkness pressing in on all sides. The further she ran, the more disoriented she became, her surroundings a blur of shadows and unfamiliar terrain. Every crack of a branch underfoot, every rustle in the underbrush, made her flinch. The sound seemed to be amplified by the isolation, each noise echoing through the forest like a warning. The forest was alive with movement, things hiding just beyond her sight, waiting. Her legs trembled with fatigue, and the blood from her earlier injuries began to seep through her clothes, leaving a trail of crimson behind her. Suddenly, she tripped. Her foot caught on a twisted root, and she fell forward, the sharp pain of impact shooting up her arm as her hands hit the cold, damp ground. A scream of frustration and terror escaped her lips as she struggled to get back on her feet. The pain in her legs was almost unbearable, but there was no time to stop. She had to keep moving. The voice of Karen was closer now, almost deafening, as if the woman were just around the next bend, ready to strike. "Where are you?" Karen screamed, her voice frantic. "I know you're out there. You can't hide." Your daughter's heart pounded, the blood rushing in her ears. She staggered to her feet, her vision swimming as she tried to regain her bearings. The forest around her had become a maze of shadows, a suffocating cocoon closing in. She didn't know how much longer she could run. The fear coursing through her was taking its toll. She was weak, dizzy, and she couldn't remember which way she'd come from, or if she was even running in the right direction. The forest had become a dark, oppressive beast, and she was trapped within it, with only the sound of Karen's enraged pursuit driving her forward. The only thing that mattered now was getting away, away from the relentless pursuit, away from the terror that was closing in. As she pushed through the dark undergrowth, the thought of escape felt almost impossible. But she had no choice. The voice of Karen was still chasing her through the night, and she had to run. She had to survive. The silence of the forest was shattered by the sharp crack of a branch underfoot, followed by the unmistakable sound of a body hitting the ground. Your daughter had tripped again, this time, it wasn't just a stumble. She fell hard, her injured leg giving way under the strain of her flight. Her breath caught in her throat as a wave of pain surged through her body. She could feel the blood rushing to her head, dizziness threatening to overwhelm her. She lay there for a moment, her body trembling, unable to move. The cold, damp ground pressed against her palms as she fought to breathe, her chest rising and falling rapidly. But there was no time to rest. She had to get up. Her mind screamed at her to keep going, even as her body screamed for relief. With great effort, she pulled herself to her feet, using the trunk of a nearby tree to steady herself. Her leg was on fire with pain, and when she glanced down, her heart sank. Blood was seeping from a gash on her leg, staining the dirt beneath her. The wound was deep, too deep to ignore. She could feel the blood flowing freely, dripping onto the forest floor with a soft, rhythmic plop. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew what that meant. The blood trail. The one she'd left behind. It was all the more real now. She could almost hear Karen's footsteps growing closer. The sound of her pursuit was relentless, echoing through the trees, growing louder with each passing moment. She had no choice but to keep moving, to push through the pain, even as the blood continued to flow freely. Her pace slowed. Each step felt heavier, her body weaker, but she couldn't stop. The fear of being caught was more terrifying than the pain that seared through her leg. The world around her seemed to blur as she stumbled through the underbrush, her hand clutching the gash on her leg in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. But it was no use. The trail she left behind was unmistakable, and it would only be a matter of time before Karen found it. The sound of Karen's voice rang through the trees, shrill and full of rage. "I'm coming for you. You can't escape me." Your daughter's pulse quickened. The realization that she was no longer just running from a woman, she was running from something far more dangerous. Every instinct told her that if Karen caught her, there would be no mercy. No pity. She glanced over her shoulder, her breath catching as she saw the faintest sign of movement in the distance, a figure moving through the shadows. Karen was closing in. Tears welled up in your daughter's eyes as she stumbled forward, the pain in her leg nearly unbearable. She could hear the blood dripping onto the ground with every step, like a clock counting down to her doom. With each drop, she could feel her strength slipping away, her energy draining, as though the forest itself was feeding on her desperation. The path ahead seemed to stretch on forever, an endless sea of trees and shadows. The forest, once her sanctuary, now felt like an inescapable trap. Every turn she took seemed to lead her deeper into the darkness. The air grew heavier, more suffocating, and the forest felt colder, as if the night itself was trying to swallow her whole. Her legs began to falter beneath her. Her vision blurred, and she stumbled again, this time falling to her knees. Her hands hit the ground, palm against the cold earth, as she gasped for air. The blood was still flowing, and with each breath, her strength seemed to drain just a little more. The sound of Karen's pursuit was unmistakable now. The steps were close, too close. Your daughter tried to push herself back up, but her body refused to obey. She could feel the weight of her own desperation pressing down on her. She knew it was only a matter of time before Karen was on top of her. Then, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Your daughter's heart hammered in her chest, her pulse racing in her ears. She knew Karen was there, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. She couldn't afford to wait. She had to get up. She had to move. She had to survive. With every ounce of remaining strength, she dragged herself up again, forcing her body to obey. Blood still trickled down her leg, leaving a crimson trail behind her, but she pushed forward. Each step was a battle, but she was determined to escape. She couldn't let Karen win. Not this time. The forest stretched out before her, endless and dark, but in that darkness, she saw the faintest flicker of hope. If she could just keep going, just a little longer, maybe, just maybe, she could outrun the nightmare chasing her. And so, she pushed forward, the blood trail behind her growing longer, as Karen's footsteps grew nearer. Your daughter's breath came in ragged gasps, each one more desperate than the last. The pain in her leg was unbearable now, a constant throb that pulsed with every heartbeat. Her bloodied footfalls had slowed, leaving a darker trail behind her, the sight of it almost too much to bear. She could feel Karen's presence like a weight on her chest, closer now, just a few steps away. It seemed like the world around her was closing in, the shadows of the forest pressing down, the trees bending towards her in an oppressive, suffocating embrace. Every glance behind her confirmed what she already knew: Karen was gaining on her. The woman's heavy breathing cut through the silence like a blade, each sound a reminder of the inevitability she was trying to outrun. But then, a faint light flickered in the distance. A glimmer of hope. It was so small at first, just a weak, distant glow cutting through the dark, but in that moment, it felt like salvation. Your daughter's heart skipped a beat, her eyes straining to focus on the light. She squinted through the thick trees, praying it was something, anything, that could help. A voice broke through the quiet, soft and distant at first, then louder. A man's voice. "Hey! Over here!" The voice was faint but clear. Your daughter's pulse quickened. Someone was out there. Someone was offering her a way out. Without hesitation, she began to push herself toward the light, ignoring the pain that flared through her leg. She stumbled forward, her steps unsteady but driven by the hope that had suddenly sparked within her. "Please," she whispered under her breath, her voice barely a sound as she pushed through the underbrush, branches catching at her hair and clothes. The light ahead grew brighter with each step, and with it, her heart filled with a strange sense of relief. Salvation was so close. But then, the snap of a twig sounded behind her, followed by Karen's voice, more furious than ever. "I'm right behind you. You can't escape me." Your daughter froze. The voice was close, too close. Panic surged in her chest as her body screamed for her to keep moving, but she couldn't afford to stop. She took one last desperate step forward, reaching for the light ahead. But just as she was about to break through the thicket, something shifted in the shadows, something unexpected. A figure appeared, blocking her path. It wasn't the man from the distant voice. Instead, it was a shadowy figure, tall and unnaturally still, its features hidden by the dark. It was standing directly in her way. Fear gripped her, freezing her in place. She could hear Karen's footsteps now, the sound of her pursuit closing in, so close she could feel the woman's rage in the air. The light ahead, her only hope, was now distant, fading like a mirage. Who are you?" Your daughter's voice trembled, her breath shallow. The figure didn't answer. It simply stood there, blocking her escape. Karen's voice rang out once more, shrill with fury. "You're mine now." The figure took a step forward. The movement was slow, deliberate, but it felt like time itself had stretched to breaking point. With every heartbeat, your daughter's hope faded further, replaced by the terror of being trapped once again. But just as Karen's steps drew near, the figure did something unexpected. It moved aside, stepping into the shadows, and in one swift motion, pointed in the opposite direction. A signal, a silent command. For a moment, your daughter hesitated, confusion filling her mind. The figure didn't speak, didn't give any reason for its actions. It simply gestured toward a darkened path deeper into the woods, an escape. Without thinking, she turned and ran, her legs barely holding her upright as she pushed past the figure into the unknown. The sound of Karen's footsteps faltered, the enraged shouts growing fainter as she took the bait. The figure remained in the shadows, its intentions unclear, but your daughter couldn't question it now. All that mattered was escaping. The path ahead was obscured, but with each step, the distance between her and Karen grew. The darkness of the forest now felt like a cloak of protection rather than confinement. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let go of the only chance she had. As she ran, the light from earlier began to fade entirely, swallowed up by the night. But it didn't matter. The moment of hope had passed, and in its place, a new possibility had emerged, one that was as mysterious as it was uncertain. Still, your daughter had one thing she didn't have before, the possibility of survival. And for now, that was enough. Your daughter's legs were on fire. Each step was a battle, every breath a strain on her exhausted body. The forest, once her refuge, had become an unyielding maze. The trees towered over her like silent sentinels, and the twisted branches seemed to grasp at her with every movement, pulling her deeper into the darkness. Her head spun, her thoughts a muddled blur of fear, pain, and desperation. She had run as far as her body would allow, but the reality was sinking in. She had nowhere left to go. The path ahead was blocked by a massive thicket, and to either side, the dense underbrush gave her no room to maneuver. She was cornered. There was nowhere left to run. The distant sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, reached her ears. They were unmistakable now, Karen's footsteps. The chase had gone on long enough, and now, Karen was finally closing in. Your daughter's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled toward the thicket, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She tried to push through the dense undergrowth, but the branches were too thick, too strong. She felt her energy slipping away with every failed attempt to break free. Her vision blurred with the weight of exhaustion and the pain from her injured leg. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep this up. And then, a voice cut through the air, sharp and cutting. "There's nowhere to hide anymore, you know." Your daughter froze. Karen's voice was laced with triumph, a cruel smirk hidden behind the words. She could hear the woman's footsteps growing louder, each step echoing in the silence of the forest. The sound of those footsteps had become a countdown, a ticking clock that signaled the end of the chase. "You think you can escape me? Think again," Karen shouted, her voice shrill with anger. "This is it. You're mine." Your daughter's breath caught in her throat. Panic surged through her veins, but her body refused to cooperate. She was too tired to run, too weak to fight. The forest that had once offered her safety now felt like a prison. Karen's shadow appeared first, looming in the distance, growing larger with every second. Your daughter's pulse quickened, her body trembling with the reality of what was about to happen. She had no strength left to outrun the woman. No hope of hiding or fighting back. The night was closing in on her, and she was trapped. Karen emerged from the shadows, her face twisted into an expression of malicious glee. She was panting, but her eyes were filled with a sick satisfaction. She had found her prey. "This is the end, sweetie," Karen sneered. "You should have stayed in line. You should have listened. Now, I'm going to make sure you never forget who's in charge." Your daughter took a shaky step back, instinctively trying to create space, but the thicket behind her offered no escape. There was no room to run, no way out. Her vision blurred again, and she could feel her body trembling uncontrollably. The blood from her injuries had soaked through her clothes, leaving a dark stain on her side. "Please," your daughter whispered, her voice barely audible, a plea escaping her lips, a broken cry. "Please, stop." Karen took a step forward, her eyes cold and unyielding. "You should have thought about that before you decided to defy me. You think I'm going to let you go? Not a chance." The confrontation was no longer just about survival. It was about power. About control. Karen had broken your daughter, reduced her to nothing more than a trembling, defeated figure before her. The woman's cruelty had no limits, and now, she was going to show your daughter just how far she would go. In that moment, your daughter's mind raced, but her body refused to listen. She wanted to fight, to push back, but the pain was too much, and the weight of fear pressed down on her chest. She thought about all the times she had tried to push through her disability, all the times she had fought against the odds. But now, she was helpless, trapped by Karen's fury, unable to escape. Karen raised her hand, a cruel smile curling on her lips. "You really thought you could escape me, huh?" Your daughter flinched, closing her eyes, bracing for what would come next. The weight of defeat crashed down on her, suffocating her. But in the silence that followed, as she awaited the inevitable, something shifted. A crack in the forest, a sound, barely audible at first, but growing louder. Something had changed. Someone was coming. The forest felt like an endless maze. Every breath was harder to catch, every step heavier than the last. Your daughter could feel her strength draining, each drop of blood that soaked through her clothes a reminder of how close she was to losing everything. She was barely standing now, trembling with exhaustion, her legs ready to give way beneath her. Karen was closing in, her footsteps like thunder in the still night. Your daughter's back was pressed against the thicket, her eyes darting wildly for an escape that wasn't there. It seemed hopeless. Karen's taunting voice echoed through the trees, every word more venomous than the last. "You're done, sweetie. I've got you now." The sound of Karen's steps grew louder, signaling the end was near. And then, something changed. A distant sound reached your daughter's ears, a faint noise at first, but growing louder with every passing second. The sound of tires on gravel. A vehicle. Your daughter's pulse quickened as the realization hit her. There was hope. Someone, anyone, was nearby. But Karen didn't seem to hear it. She was still too caught up in her own twisted satisfaction, the cruelty of her presence suffocating the air between them. As Karen drew closer, your daughter's gaze frantically searched the darkness, every nerve in her body screaming for action. The sound of the vehicle grew louder. It was real. It was close. Your daughter's mind raced as the adrenaline surged through her veins. A vehicle meant escape. It meant a chance at survival. She couldn't wait any longer. With her breath coming in short, painful bursts, she gathered what little strength she had left. The blood from her leg was still flowing freely, leaving a slick trail on the ground, but she pushed forward, her hands shaking as she reached for the thick branches blocking her path. With a final, desperate shove, she cleared a small gap just wide enough to slip through. She wasn't sure where the path would lead, but it didn't matter. It was a chance, her only chance. Karen's voice rang out behind her, furious now. "Don't you dare try to run." Her words sliced through the night like a whip, and the sound of her footsteps quickened. She was close. Too close. But as your daughter stumbled through the gap in the underbrush, she heard the vehicle again, this time much closer. The hum of the engine, the sound of tires crunching on gravel, she wasn't imagining it. It was real, and it was moving toward her. The last shred of doubt vanished. She was going to make it. She ran. Her body protested with every step, her legs feeling like they were made of lead. She couldn't keep going much longer. Her breath was shallow, her vision swimming, but she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. As she pushed forward, the headlights of the vehicle broke through the trees, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. She didn't hesitate. With the sound of Karen's shouts growing fainter behind her, she sprinted toward the vehicle, the engine now roaring as it pulled closer. Just as she reached the edge of the clearing, Karen's hand shot out, grabbing at her shirt. For a split second, she felt Karen's fingers brush against her skin, and a surge of panic washed over her. But before Karen could tighten her grip, the headlights from the vehicle flashed across the clearing, blinding Karen for just a moment. In that instant, your daughter broke free. She sprinted toward the vehicle with every ounce of energy she had left, her bloodied feet pounding against the earth. The car's door swung open, and she didn't need to be told twice. She dove inside, slamming the door behind her. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle tore away from the clearing, leaving the darkness of the forest behind. The tires screeched as they hit the gravel, kicking up dirt and debris. Your daughter's heart hammered in her chest, her body shaking from the shock of her escape, but she was safe. For now. Behind them, the forest loomed, silent again. The sound of Karen's pursuit had faded into the distance, replaced by the whine of the engine and the rush of wind through the cracked window. But as the car sped away, your daughter couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. There was no relief, no victory yet. Karen was still out there. The chase might be over for tonight, but the terror that had gripped her heart was far from gone. As the vehicle sped toward safety, your daughter glanced back at the forest one last time, the shadow of Karen lingering in the corners of her mind. She had escaped. But for how long? The question lingered in the air as the car drove into the night, the road ahead uncertain, but for now, her survival was all that mattered. The car rolled to a stop, its engine purring softly as it came to rest on the outskirts of a small clearing. Your daughter's pulse still raced in her ears, her chest heaving with the aftershocks of her escape. She had made it. She was out of the forest, away from Karen's clutches, and yet, as the reality of her safety began to sink in, it felt surreal. Her hands trembled as she gripped the seat, her vision blurred by tears she hadn't realized had begun to fall. The warm light from the car's interior illuminated the blood-stained clothes on her body, the trail of crimson she had left behind. She wiped her face, her hands slick with the remnants of her ordeal. The blood had soaked into her clothes, staining everything. Her leg throbbed, the pain nearly unbearable, but there was no time to focus on that. Not now. Not when the adrenaline was starting to wear off, and the full weight of what had just happened began to crush down on her. The driver, a stranger who had come out of nowhere, looked at her with wide, concerned eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice kind but uncertain. She nodded but didn't speak. What could she say? How could she explain the chaos, the fear, the terror that had just unfolded? Her mind was in a whirlwind, still trying to process everything that had happened, the moments she barely remembered, the pain and horror she'd endured. Her eyes stared out the window, unable to look at him anymore. Instead, she focused on the darkened forest in the distance. The lights of the car seemed so far removed from the chaos, yet the memories lingered like a nightmare she couldn't escape. The forest felt like another world now, one she would never be able to forget. The smell of damp earth, the sound of her blood pounding in her ears, the constant fear of Karen's breath on her neck, it all rushed back in waves. Reflection, the car ride felt endless. Her body was physically exhausted, battered, but it was her mind that was in turmoil. She had escaped, yes, but at what cost? She thought of the blood trail she'd left behind, literally and figuratively. How long would it be before Karen came after her again? Was this truly over, or was it just a brief reprieve before something even worse? Her mind kept replaying the moments in the forest, each second stretching out longer than the last. What if Karen had caught her? What if the stranger had not appeared when he did? These thoughts, heavy and dark, swirled in her head. She couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done with her. The look in Karen's eyes, the way she stalked her through the woods, it was clear that Karen wouldn't stop until she had complete control. But why? What drove her to this level of obsession? And then there was the question that gnawed at her most: who was the mysterious figure who had guided her to safety? The figure who had stepped aside, allowing her to escape when all seemed lost. What was their role in this? Were they a stranger, a chance passerby, or was there something more to their presence? And why did they help her? She had no answers. Only questions. Suspenseful elements, the questions kept coming, louder with each passing second. She could feel the uncertainty building inside her. Karen was still out there, somewhere. She hadn't been caught, hadn't been stopped. She could still be hunting for her. The night was far from over. And what about the mysterious figure? The one who had gestured for her to run. The one who had chosen to step aside at the last moment, blocking Karen's path only to disappear into the shadows. Was that just a twist of fate, or had they been watching all along? The stranger driving the car was now speaking again, asking if she wanted to go to the hospital, but she didn't hear him. Her mind was elsewhere, trapped in the darkness of the forest and the mystery of what had really happened. The car's headlights pierced through the night as they drove further away from the forest, but the feeling of the trees looming behind her, of Karen's voice echoing in her mind, refused to fade. Revelation, as the car pulled onto a main road and the lights of the town blinked into view, your daughter had one final thought that made her stomach churn: this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't just a woman driven by anger. There was something far deeper at play. The chase was just a part of something bigger, something she didn't yet understand. And she feared it was only a matter of time before the nightmare would find her again. The mystery of her escape, the figure in the woods, and Karen's unrelenting pursuit were all pieces of a puzzle she wasn't ready to solve, but she would have to. It was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down on her.